something grabs my shoulders and pulls me and pins me to my pillow. And I was trying to wrestle out of it and instantly I started, reacting to it. But then I found that I couldn't move my legs.
Welcome to another episode of Encounters with God. I have a very special guest today. I've read his book, watched some of his sermons and teachings. Just really has a great heart to communicate the message of Jesus Christ to the generation he lives in, and just really inspiring. He used to pray, but he used to pray to Allah, and he's an author, a husband, father, pastor. He pastors Mosaic Church in Charlotte, North Carolina. Co-founder of What If Everyone? It's a city outreach ministry. He was a Sunni Muslim. And so I appreciate your time, Naeem, and welcome to the program, brother.
Hey, thank you. Honored to be here. Glad to be a part of what you guys are doing here. So thanks for having me.
Well, you bet. Well, let's just kind of start from the beginning. You were born in Pakistan, correct?
No, actually, no. So I was born in
Kuwait. I'm sorry.
Yes. Yeah, it's kind of confusing because my older brother was born in Pakistan. We are Pakistanis, but right after he was born, about 2 years after he was born, my parents moved from Pakistan to Kuwait, and still Pakistanis, obviously. So technically, I am still from Pakistan, but I was born and raised in Kuwait. Yeah.
And so your story really kind of begins in the book. Is really a good. Your brother was in the States.
Correct.
Your older brother, and you wanted to come to the States because you wanted to meet a blonde-headed, blue-eyed girl, didn't you?
that was definitely part of the plan. Yes.
Yeah. So the Iraqi army invaded Kuwait, and that kind of facilitated part of that
Yes.
journey to get you out.
Yeah. I love to share that story. I mean, if you want me to.
Yeah. Absolutely.
So what happens is that just to give you context for people that so we were Sunni Muslim Pakistanis, and then my parents moved to Kuwait. We're still Sunni Muslims, and Kuwait is a Muslim country. It's an Arab country, and so we all lived there for so long. And we lived there. So I've got two brothers, two sisters, and my brother, who's about 4 years older than me, got accepted to a college in the US, and he got accepted to Spartanburg Methodist University. And we had no idea what Methodist meant, So we're like, oh, great, we're sending him to America. And so he comes back the next year, and comes back and tells me and my sisters that he's a born again believer. And I'm like, what? You're a what? And he was so passionate about it. He was going to tell mom and dad about it. And so he was no longer a Muslim and all that. And man, I had a really crazy reaction. And as you read the book, I threatened to kill him. It was pretty intense. I mean, he didn't say anything to mom and dad. And then he came back to the States to finish up college. And this was like in the late 80s. So when he came back here, it was 1990. It had turned 1990, and it was the summer of 1990, while he was still here in the US, and we were in Kuwait, that Iraq invaded Kuwait. And so we were there, and he was over here, stateside.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So, yeah, and then after the Gulf War, that lasted, pretty much 2 years or so, because liberation, occupation, all of those things, Desert Storm, Desert Shield, some of you guys remember that. Yeah, we survived it. We were there throughout all of it. Mm-hmm. And came here after that in 1992. I got a tourist visa to come to the States, and so I got here, and excited to be here, but I had no idea what God had planned, for me. So
Yeah, you hit Miami and everybody looked like you, brother.
Yeah, yes. It's so true. It's like this crazy story. I mean, because I grew up on like in Kuwait. You have like this. Um, you get a little bit of American television, but you also get British television. But the American television that I grew up on was the A Team. If anybody remembers the A Team,
Sure.
and then Knight Rider, if you
Yeah.
guys remember that, So I'm like, I was expecting that. Honestly, I was expecting, that I would run into the A Team kind of thing. I had no idea, but yeah, flew directly to Miami, and I joke about it because I had no idea, no
Yeah.
idea that there were
Yeah.
Hispanics. Honestly, I didn't even think about Hispanics till
Mhm.
until I
Yeah.
became one of them in a sense.
Right, right. Yeah. Yeah.
So then took a Greyhound bus. And if you read the story, that was a whole ordeal with the
Yeah, it's a
Greyhound bus.
trip.
It
Yeah.
was literally a trip, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, and
You had to get a cab to chase the bus down, didn't you?
yes. I know. It seems comical. I mean, it seems like a movie, it's
Yeah.
ridiculous. But yes, the bus left me, had no idea. Um, And you remember what saved me, right? What saved me right there was my dad telling me to stash $80 or
Yeah.
money in my
Yeah.
socks.
Uh-huh.
It's crazy, but
And
yeah,
it's a miracle that your stuff wasn't stolen.
it is,
I mean, you know,
yeah. Honestly, I mean, Ken, that book is all about these miracles after miracles.
it really is. As I was reading through it, it really hit me about just, the sovereignty
Mm-hmm.
and the providence of God,
Mm-hmm.
how God orchestrated one situation to another, to really to bring you to your destiny, to where you are now.
Right. Yeah, no doubt. No doubt. And when you think about it sometimes, in our own lives, when we think about this, we go, man, he must love us so much, you know,
Yeah.
so much grace for us. Because I mean,
Mhm,
to, handcraft in a sense, to be so intentional with us in our lives,
mhm,
to be so involved in our lives, giving us grace after grace and setting us up, man. God, God's love is profound. Yeah, it should humble us. So yeah.
mhm. So you finally make it to your brother's place there, where he's a Christian now,
Yes.
and he starts to drag you along to some Fellowship of Christian Athlete meetings.
Right, he did. And if you remember in the book, like the thing was, he told me what it was, and I wasn't interested. And then he was like, "Hey, there's cute girls there, so you should come."
Yeah.
And I was like, "Okay, let's just try this." Because again, I had, I mean, I just got here. I wanted to meet people, and yeah, and
Mhm.
that's where I first heard about. That was my first Christian service experience, church experience, or of any kind, worship experience, if you want to call it. But it was just a collegiate FCA meeting, and I started going there, and that's when I heard about this gospel, the story of God that Jesus told, because every religion tells a story about God, and then Jesus came and tells a story about who God is and who He is, and that was fascinating to me. It was fascinating because it was really unbelievable, because other religions, Islam included, you just live a life trying to prove yourself. You have to prove to God that you are worthy, and that you have to reach them. And Greek mythology tells us there's that mankind has always been trying to reach the gods, and the gods have their own personality, and you have to prove worthy of the gods. And religion does the same thing. But then at FCA meetings, I heard about this guy who humbled himself, who comes down in the form of Jesus, and who pursues humanity. And he believes, and he knows that, that we could never reach him, that he has to reach us, and that he comes to us. He makes a way for us. He makes us worthy. He makes us right. And then even a place of worship that we are no longer required to build temples or to go to temples, in a sense, for worship, that God's Spirit wants to live inside of us, and we become the temple of the Holy Spirit. That's just mind-blowing, and it changes the shift, of everything, and that God has come here, and it's no longer about building temples and worship spaces. It's about building the church, which is people, which is a group of people, which is worshipers who will worship God in spirit and truth. And so anyways, that was fascinating to me. And in the middle of all that, my brother was also convinced that because of the message of Jesus, that he was so intentional and personal that he would reveal himself to me if I asked him to, honestly. And and man, one night at FCA I did, and that changed the game for me.
Yeah, Jesus actually, he had a supernatural experience. Tell us a little bit about that. I mean, I know there was some demonic activity involved, and when God finally spoke to you, your prayer and calling out to the Lord.
Yeah. When I tell the story, sometimes I get I joke about it, but so my first prayer was, basically I looked up, as everybody else was ending in prayer at FCA. I looked up and I just said, hey, if this is real, I want to know. That's all I know, and then I thought, oh, I'm just talking to myself. And that was it. And I didn't tell anybody about that prayer. And I didn't tell my brother that. I didn't tell anybody that. And then, 3 nights later, I'm in my room. It's nighttime, and I'm trying to fall. I'm about to fall asleep, kind of thing. And I was reading something and put that down, and I turned to shut off the lamplight, and the room just turned. Something happened in the room. It turned evil. It turned like I was in a different dimension. When my body began to react to something that I could not really sense, I could not really see, and it felt like death walked in. Honestly, it felt like, and I was trying to figure out what that was, all of a sudden something grabs my shoulders and pulls me and pins me to my pillow, and I was trying to wrestle out of it, and instantly I started, reacting to it. But then I found that I couldn't move my legs; they were pinned to the ground. To the bed as well. And man, I started flipping out, just going crazy. Started screaming, and then I realized I couldn't hear anything. Like I couldn't hear. I could move my mouth, could move my neck. I could, my eyes were open, all that, but I couldn't physically move my body or my hands, and I couldn't hear myself. And man, I'm like, I have no idea. I'm still trying to figure out what's going on. I'm still in shock here, but I can sense and see that the room is alive with stuff, and it's not good things, So then finally the door opened up, and in walked this demon. And, Ken, if you know anything about Islam, we're not really into demons or, we believe in jinns and things like that, but it's not a thing, it's not part of our, theology, it's not, the Quran doesn't mention them. There's not really any of that. So I'm like, what is going on? And for some reason, I just knew this was evil. I mean, it looked evil, obviously. And I just was like, I'm like, listen, man, wrong room, this is craziness. And I don't even believe in this. And this thing starts walking up or getting closer. And I'm thinking about all the things I'm thinking this is punishment. I'm going to die, and this thing communicates to me. He says, I'm going to kill you. And then I start thinking, okay, what did I do? I must have, really ticked off someone, so I'm like, maybe this is Allah, the God of Islam. And I thought, because, doubting in Islam is considered a sin. And so I'm like, this is, I'm sinning. This is Allah. And then I was like, no, this can't be Allah. And then I'm thinking this is Jesus. Because, I said some really terrible things about Jesus. And I'm like, in my head, I'm like, this looks nothing like the pictures of Jesus, but I'm just saying it could be. And then I'm like freaking out, man. I'm like, I joke about it. I pray to every God out there, you know, Allah, Buddha, Oprah, you know, everything. And this thing reaches my bed, and I think it's gonna end, and then just disappears. Like this, I can't see it anymore. Whatever was holding me lets go. And so I find myself just stunned in my bed, and I'm like, what just happened? And the room is still different. It's still like evil looking, feeling, but I don't know what's going on. I get up, I sit on my bed and then run out of the room, wake up my brother, and I'm like, what did you do, man? What's going on here? I tell him what happened, and he goes, yeah. You know, it's so funny because as I'm telling him, I'm scared to death, but as more he hears my story, the more there's a faint smile on his face. You know, I'm like, what are you doing? Your creepy smile is creeping me out. You know, like, why are you excited about this? And so I finally end the story and tell him what happened. And he goes, well, this is all true, man. It's all real. And I'm like, well, I was hoping you would say it's not real, you know? And he was like, oh, it's real. And he says, it's actually in the Bible. And to me, that was like shocking. I'm like, what are you talking about? What do you mean it's in the Bible? And he goes, well, the stories, like, not like this, but, you know, demon stories. And again, I was like, I have no context, you know, I have no idea, right? I have no idea. And if you practice like different faiths, not practice, but if you know about different faiths, you know that, I mean, they you know, no one has you know, there's no theology of demons in any other religion, you know, right?
Right.
You don't see religious books where the God is battling or casting out demons. There's no other book, you know, other, you know, religious books out there where God is interacting with people, where he's healing people, he's casting out demons. I had no idea. You know, I just thought all the books were the same, you know, like Christians had their book and Muslims had their book, and it's all a list of things you don't do and you're not supposed to do, and, you know, ceremonies and all that. So he tells me this, and I can't believe it. And he begins to explain some of the stuff that happened. To him, he was like, this is, you know, this is God's in the middle of this. You're on top of a mountain. He starts explaining to me, he was like, I just feel like you can go either way, and the Satan wants to come and kill, steal, destroy, and he wants to, you know, scare you out of this, and he wants you to not do anything, but there's obviously something that's supposed to happen, and Jesus is real, and and after he tells me that, and he talks about sin and death, and talks about redemption and salvation and all that, and I just go, you know what, I just need help, man. Like, I just need something to, like, you know, like, I just need something to get this demon off my back, that this would never happen again to me. If that's what I need, you know, because I was 18 at the time, you know, I'm like, I just came through a war. I'm just trying to live here, man. So then he was like, you know, well, he said, there's only one person I know who has authority over demons and angels. And I was like, yeah, okay, who? He was like, Jesus. And I was like, well, let's do this. So then so right there and there, you know, we pray. And again, I mean, there's so many details to this. So, but I pray a prayer before he leads me into a prayer of salvation. He just goes, I say, you know, Jesus, I don't know who you are, so I can't say you're the Lord of my life. I don't know anything about you, but if you'll save me from this, I'll give you my whole life. And, you know, Ken, I'm just so glad I said that, you know?
Yeah.
Because it started off very real. It started off like, hey,
Sure.
I don't know anything, you know?
That's honest.
It's honest. And then also, Ken, you know, I don't know if you know this, but like, so since I'm Pakistani, my native language is Urdu, right?
Yeah.
But Islam is practiced in Arabic.
Right.
So, and all the prayers are in Arabic. So regardless of what nationality or language you are, you know, Allah only responds to Arabic.
He knows one language.
Right. He's not bilingual, apparently, like, so, he's just, that's it. So now I'm praying again in English, which is not my first language either, to another God. So I didn't want to say something that I didn't mean or didn't understand. So that's why I prayed that. And then my brother prayed for me and we prayed together, and then, and we said, amen, amen. And I was still scared to death. And he was like, all right, man, I'll see you in the morning. And then I was trying to sleep with him, like that night. I was like, I want to stay with you, man. He was like, no, you got to go back in the room and go back to bed. And I go into detail about argument about that in the book, but I finally went in the room, and I had the lights on. I started reading a small Bible that he gave me, and I was freaking out. And but then the next thing I know, man, something was shaking me, and I was like, oh my goodness, round two, this is gonna happen again. And I find myself the next minute, Ken, sitting on my bed, with my eyes open, and there he was. There he was, Ken. I mean, he said, I am Jesus, and your life is not your own. And I can't tell you exactly what I saw, because people ask me all the time, well, okay, what did he look like? It's the strangest thing, Ken. It was like where I was looking at him, but I was inside of him. And it was the craziest thing. I was like, it's you. And then I said, I remember physically saying, I am inside of you. And I'm like, it was such a trippy, to use that word, it was such a crazy experience, but I've never felt peace and love so peaceful and aggressive, so full. Like I couldn't keep my eyes off of him, but I couldn't keep my eyes open. Like he literally put me to sleep. Like I couldn't be in that state. For long, I just knew that my body could not be in this state in front of him. I couldn't stand being in his presence. And I then woke up the next morning, and I had gotten this picture, a download, I would say, of being in ministry and giving my life to the cause and being called by him. I had no idea about those words, being called in ministry or anything like that, but I just knew.
Sure.
And that just led to, my two sisters and my true brother and my other brother coming to Christ as well. Me praying with them. And then also my dad, before he passed away 5 years ago, I got to pray with him as well to accept Christ. So it's been quite an amazing ride.
Yeah, that's quite a step, because when you leave Islam, I mean, it's like when you made that commitment to Christ, it's like, in a sense, you're leaving family, your nationality. There's a target on your back, and you're worthy of death in their eyes. So you're really stepping away from it.
Oh yeah, for sure. And we in Pakistan, Pakistanis are very much it's a society that is very knit together. And if you've ever heard of arranged marriages,
Yes.
so then
They were trying to set you up.
They were because that was our culture.
Yeah.
It was that was our culture. And so I was like, I was like, I'm gonna marry my cousin, and so like even because of that, like the amount of just disconnection we've had with my extended family, with our cousins, has been pretty interesting. I just don't interact with any of my cousins.
Well, even your mother was really upset to begin with.
Oh yeah, so much so. So much so, Mother's Day is coming up, and I was just writing some things about her, and I just realized how much I do appreciate her. She's still a practicing Muslim,
Hmm.
and it makes it so hard sometimes, so
Yeah.
hard. But I broke her heart, man. I told her that, her two sons were Christian at the time, when I broke it to her, and her one daughter, and then after that, you know,
Mhm.
um, all my others, all the others came to Christ. But yeah, for us, like initially, I mean, just even my sisters before they came to Christ, and my mom, like just the feeling of, disownment, like you're not my kid anymore, you're not my brother anymore, I've heard that, before, so um but now, now it's God's grace has really covered us, so it's good right now.
Yeah. What's interesting is as the West, I guess we hear more and more stories um, about Muslims having these supernatural encounters with God. I
Mhm.
mean, in the beginning, people were like, okay, that's a one off or this there. But you hear so many stories now about people having visions, people having dreams, or, someone appeared in front of them and they saw a man in white. And God is doing something special over there.
Yeah, and you know what though, Ken, is that it's I think they don't get a lot of press, if you to say,
Mhm.
use that word, they don't get a lot of coverage because for a couple of reasons, so there are Muslims coming to faith in the US, stories like mine,
Yeah.
but I'm just one of the most vocal people out there. It seems like I'm the only one, and it's not. I'm
Mhm.
not.
All right.
There are other people, but it's just they don't want to take the risk. Um they don't want the attention. They're scared of what might come to go down. um
Mhm.
in the Middle East, you hear these stories, but I work with churches in Pakistan and Arab world, and you've got to basically leave the town that you're in if you convert,
Mhm.
because you can't stay there. Because
Yeah.
once you convert, and once you're like practicing Christian, what that means is you're gonna stop showing up to Friday prayers. That's gonna happen. Then you're gonna stop practicing all the other holidays and all, Ramadan. You're gonna stop doing all those things. And a lot of people are nominal, like just nominal Christian Muslims there. They're
Yeah.
just like, just for namesake, and they traditional just because they've been doing it, so they just do it. Does that make sense? There's so many people who just are.
That's like Christians. That's just like Christians in America. They go to church
Exactly,
on Sunday, you know?
exactly.
Mhm.
And so the thing is like, if you just lived in a very small town, Southern conservative Christians, right? If you just pretend to play the game, if you just go to church and do the thing and all that, no one cares. But if you
Yeah.
go, hey, I'm no longer doing that, then small
Mhm.
town people are like, what? I haven't
Yeah,
seen him
what's
in
up?
church. I haven't done this. And now he's saying he's a Muslim, or now he's saying he's something else. Well, in Islam, it's punishable by death. So
Mm.
that's why Muslims are coming to faith, but they just keep it hush hush. But it's happening here, and definitely in the Muslim world.
Yeah, I had an Iranian Muslim, and he was telling me he actually invited me. He said, Brother Ken, he said, you're welcome to go on one of these trips with me. He tries to take about 15 people, and he says, I
Mhm.
promise you this: if you go, you will see more people, you'll see more miracles, you'll hear more supernatural stories. And he says, I believe that the greatest revival on planet Earth right now is happening in Iran now.
Mhm.
That's his
Really?
Yeah. He says, man, he says, I see people getting out of wheelchairs. I see cancers. I show up at these different locations. It's kind of a secret deal. I mean, that's, he's got a connection here. Someone leads him there. And, it's a little
Yeah.
bit, cloak and dagger because of the concerns for his safety. But yeah, I was just blown away by some of the stories he shared. And I'm sure you hear stories similar to that as well.
Yeah, I mean, yes, this is Iran. Yeah, Iran. Yeah, I mean, I have a friend who works in Egypt, and
Mhm.
he said the same thing. Same thing. Yeah,
Yeah.
same thing, that it's happening, um, and we just don't even realize it. That's the thing. We just don't even realize it. People are not really thinking about it, but yeah, it's happening. It's happening for sure. Yeah.
Well, let's talk a little bit about your development. So you had this supernatural encounter with the Lord, and immediately felt called into the ministry. So just kind of give us a little. I know now you're pastor of a large church there in Charlotte, North Carolina. It's very influential. Just kind of give us a 5-10 minute version of how you got from praying a prayer uh, there with your brother to pastoring this very influential church there in North Carolina.
Oh, well, thank you. I mean, we um, definitely love what God has allowed me to experience and lead and start with Mosaic Church. But yeah, it started uh, basically that night when I felt called. I had no idea what anything was.
Hmm.
So that night went from really the next couple of weeks. I mentioned this in the book, but in a couple I just had to figure out what I got myself into. Like, I had no idea, like, just
Yeah.
literally no idea. And it had only been 3 weeks to like that I was in the States. I mean, I literally had not even, I didn't know anything,
So
I
you
had,
you had that you were almost just going to be here for a month, so it was another intervention of God, wasn't it? Because your
right,
temporary visa was for a month, and
right.
you know,
I didn't, yeah, so I was like, okay, this has happened. So I'm going to try to understand that. Okay, well, I'm not here. I'm not staying here apparently because I got to
yeah,
be out. And then someone just on the side was like, "Hey, listen, you can't go back." See, Ken, the problem was I didn't even know that in Islam, I knew it was forbidden. I didn't realize they would kill you for
yeah, that's-
it. Yeah, I didn't know it was a law.
yeah,
Like, I broke it. I didn't know it was a law.
mhm,
And the law was like, you're punishable by death. And I was like,
exactly.
I'm like, oh. So then that led to me getting going after religious asylum, which I eventually got. So that was a whole, process for years. If you have to prove yourself you're a Christian and all, it's a whole thing. So while that was happening, I actually really felt God impressed me to just focus for 3 years, intense, just to understand everything there is about the scriptures, but just have a 3 year focus. And I mean, which meant also I wouldn't date for 3 years. So I didn't date
Yeah,
3 years. I mean, my dating years, in a sense, I just did not. I didn't get in any relationship. I did none of that, and
mhm,
just focused in on that. And then after that, right after that, God provided. God, met a girl at FCA,
mm,
and Ashley, my wife, and so. But while that was happening, how I got to Mosaic, or starting Mosaic, was that I started looking around at churches. I started visiting churches. I had no idea about denominations. So in my search to figure that out, then I realized that certain denominations really were not really keen on talking about demons,
yeah,
and really believe that, and then
yeah,
I just heard all these terms that I now know, but I was trying to figure out, like, what? Some of you guys don't believe this, and some of you guys do that, and there's charismatics and conservatives and Pentecostals and Assemblies of God and Church of God and First Baptist and Second Baptist and
huh,
Methodists and Presbyterians, and I mean, I'm like, what is going on?
Yeah.
In all of those, I started just trying to find a church, and my brother and I were, college age students, so trying to get into college, but then found a church called Seacoast Church. And Seacoast was a church that came out of an Assemblies of God church, but it was a contemporary church, So
Yeah.
in Charleston, South Carolina, and started attending there. And then actually I met a pastor there called Michael Morris. He's actually in the book. And I asked him to just walk with me, to mentor me, and yeah, we would meet every week, once a week for 3 years. We just kept on meeting for more than 3 years. But anyways, and then that led to me helping out in the church, volunteering in the church, leading in the church, at Seacoast, and then coming on as an intern in the church, and then coming on as a director, student ministry director, and then or being ordained as a pastor there. So I kind of grew up there, began to take certain leadership roles, began to lead the ministry, young adults ministry, and college ministry, and young married singles, adults ministry, like all the ministries. And then they started doing campuses, and we did all that. And I started doing a Tuesday night every week service, because I think that was influential in my life with FCA. So I started doing a Tuesday night gathering.
Yeah.
And I began to see some really amazing things happen there, a highly diverse group of people coming together, college students, seeing a lot of cool miracles take place, baptizing Buddhist people, kids, it was amazing stuff. So I just felt one day during worship that God was saying, I need you to go reach a more diverse group of people. And I just didn't realize what that meant. Like, I saw a picture of me speaking to a very diverse group of people. And so I began talking to my pastor, Greg, who led the church. And I said, hey, I just don't know what I'm supposed to be doing. I'm in college right now and all this. And so we just started thinking and talking about it. And and then I met another pastor who was influential, Erwin McManus. He's in the book as well. And he told me we were just talking one day, and he said, why don't you go start a church? And I'm like, what are you talking about? Like, what, how can I start a church? Like, I had no idea, like, I could start a church. Like, I was barely an immigrant, a citizen. I don't even know if I was a citizen, honestly, at the time. I was still an immigrant. I was still, just had my green card.
Yeah.
And, and so I said, okay, so I started thinking about it, praying about it, my wife and I, and so we just felt like God was calling us. And so our leaders, our pastors kind of affirmed it as well, and they helped us. And so 2006, we started Mosaic Church in North Carolina. So we left South Carolina, went to North Carolina, because, based on just research, Charlotte was was going to be more and more diverse. It was leading the way there because of, the banking industry and some of the things. There were a lot of foreign nationals that would come to that. So, so we started 17 years ago, and it's been quite the journey. So.
That's awesome. And you also founded an outreach ministry there that we mentioned in the beginning. It's
What if everyone?
What if everyone? Tell us a little bit about What If Everyone. What's involved with that? And
so What If Everyone started with just, with my wife having a heart for outreach, like practical outreach in the city. And we were talking, and I was like, what if we started a movement called What If Everyone? What if everyone worshiped God by serving humanity? How will that change the world?
wow.
So we're like, I think it would, And so, it's pretty simple. We've been able to partner with different organizations in our city, and even around the world, to just serve people in practical ways. So there's nothing glamorous about it. It's just practical stuff, they've been able to do, which led us to, a work that we've been doing for 12 years now in the Dominican Republic, to a work where, we're supporting 2 sister churches in Italy, and we're also partnering with multiple schools here and organizations in our city to serve our city. So
Yeah, it's just so practical. I mean, a lot of people, they just seem to just sit in the pews and, you know, they go to the church on Sunday or Wednesday, whatever. But this really gets them involved and lets them become involved in ministry to affect the culture, affect the world.
mm-hmm. And this "What if everyone" is just an inspiration, like for people to just imagine what if you did something that would practically serve someone. So we know the power of words, so we did a thing once where we asked our church during service, or at the end of the service, for everyone, if they could, to write cards that we were going to pass out to healthcare workers, just encourage. And I mean, that took maybe 6-7 minutes, right, for people. That's it.
Mhm.
And then we mailed them, like we took them and they got, and when a healthcare worker gets a card that, hey, I don't know you, but I'm praying for you, and here's a passage of scripture, I mean, you don't know how, a card will change people's lives sometimes, how, and even Proverbs tells us, like a kind word at the right time is like, man, it is medicine for the soul,
Mhm.
So, hey, it took 7 minutes, 6 minutes.
Yeah, a big effort on our part, but
Right.
yet it can affect somebody's life. Yeah, I know yesterday just something like that, even as believers, someone sent me an email
Mm.
and just said, "Hey man, I read your book and what a blessing it was. I appreciate you so much." And it's just completely out of the blue. And matter of fact, I think the guy's in North Carolina, I think.
Oh,
I have to go
wow.
back and look, but
Uh,
anyway, it was just so out of the blue, I may not contact him but once a year, or he may not contact me but once a year, but he's there, and I'm here, and but it was
right,
just a God thing. When you get, like you said, the scripture there, it really touches people.
right, right. Yeah, yeah.
What
Hmm.
about some tips? We know that there's like the 5 pillars of Islam, and what are some ways that Christians, as we see more and more, here in Texas, I see more and more Muslims at some of the larger cities, and even they're moving in all around us as neighbors and so forth. What are some ways that we can converse and understand them, and you know without being offensive, trying to lead them to Christ? What
Yeah,
are some tips there?
yeah. I think the first thing would be is that to understand, like people want to make sure they're not offensive, right? They want to make sure that they're not, um, and the scriptures tell us to be, to always be ready to give an answer to ones who ask, you know. And I think that's the key thing there, is that you have to be in a place where they want to ask. So you can never be offensive to people who want to ask you. See, I
Yeah.
think what happens sometimes is when evangelism doesn't work really well, when you're trying to sell Jesus,
Yes.
when you're trying to convince say a Muslim shopper to buy Jesus, in a sense, it
Mhm.
comes across like that. But if you do evangelism where you have a relationship with them and you're just talking to them about your life, it's never offensive.
Mhm.
Never offensive, It's like it's like um it's like saying, it's like, for example, saying to say a conservative Muslim who doesn't eat pork, if you guys are eating together and he's Muslim and you're eating, I don't know, um, a barbecue or whatever, you could turn to him and he's eating something else. You could turn to him and say, man, I wish you weren't a Muslim because this stuff is amazing. Right?
Yeah.
You even said that. What are you saying? You're just saying this stuff is amazing. I wish you could do it.
Mm-hmm.
Is that offensive?
Yeah.
No, it's not. It's not offensive. Why? Because number one, you're a friend. And you're just saying, I just wish you could taste some of this.
Yeah.
But if the person is not a friend, if you don't even know someone, and they're eating chicken, you're eating, barbecue, pork barbecue, and you just turn to them and go, can't believe you're eating chicken because pork is the one you should be eating. Well,
You've been alienated.
Yeah, you've number one, I don't know you.
Yeah.
And you just compared my food to yours. You know what I'm saying? But if you're a friend, you're like, oh my gosh, man, I mean, that's great, but this is amazing. Friends understand that. People in relationship understand that. So I think the first thing you need to do is people need to say is, who are the people who are Muslims in my world that I can befriend? Who can I do that? Bringing your friends to Jesus is more beautiful than just strangers to Jesus. So make them friends first, and once you make them friends, once you make them then you can just talk to them. And so number one, do that. Number two, and that takes time, but number two, don't ask the questions, and have conversations. Don't give them answers and ask them to make a decision. See, before, what we've been taught sometimes, how to evangelize is you give them the answer to life, right? Where would you go if you died? You give them an answer, and then you ask for a decision. Well, that's great for, Western people who are living in a, quote unquote Christian society. But to a Muslim, you don't do that. You ask questions, and you hope for, or your goal is not a decision. You ask for a conversation. Could we keep talking about this? Does that make sense? So it's asking them, hey, what kind of Muslim are you? What do you guys do? What do you guys do? What do you guys do? You know what we do, da 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 da. Have you ever thought of this and this and this? So when Christian people will talk to me about Jesus, there are people who did a bad job of it because they were like, your God stinks, my God is true. That was kind of the attitude that I got, You're just an idiot to believe this. And then there were people who really were, hey, that's cool that you are, but there could be more to this. You could have more of a personal relationship with God. That got me in there. That got me. Do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Oh, there could be more. There could be a more deeper relationship. Okay. I'm interested in that. What didn't get me was, hey, you're wrong. And I just wanted to be right, so that's why I'm with Jesus. No, I wasn't thinking right or wrong. I was just thinking, is there more? Could there be more? That'd be great if there was more, So make Muslims curious about your faith. Don't criticize their faith. Make them curious about yours. If you make them curious about your faith, then you're more likely to see people come to Jesus. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and yes, and incorporating Jesus in it. Now I know Muslims, I mean, they think of Jesus as like he's this miracle dude. I mean, he's in there, he's a miracle worker and all that. So that's how is a good way to kind of bring Jesus into the conversation where a Muslim would feel comfortable with that?
Yeah. So, depending on the kind of Muslim he is or she is, they believe that Jesus is the Messiah. So some of them might not even realize this, but according to their own Quran, Jesus is the Messiah who's coming back. So asking them, hey, why would Jesus be coming back? Like, why not Muhammad?
Yeah, good.
I mean, if Muhammad is your main prophet, shouldn't he come back?
That's an engaging question.
Yeah, why him? Why did even Muhammad said, oh, well, I'm not coming back, Jesus? So that gets them thinking.
Yes.
Like, oh, okay, yeah. Huh. So then why is like the whole Christmas story, you know, how Jesus was born, Mary and Joseph, and you know, she was planned to be wed to Joseph. That whole Christmas story that's literally in the Quran.
Yeah.
So why is that in the Quran? You know, out of all the things, why is that in the Quran? Why does Prophet Muhammad make a big deal about Jesus? That gets them thinking. You know?
Yeah.
So why is it that the Quran is cool with the only other people that the Muslims are supposed to be cool with, or Muhammad says to be cool with, and that they're going to be in heaven, are Christians? Why? Not Hindus, and not Jewish people. So why? What's this fact? You know, so when you get them thinking, like, why is this? Why? And I think that opens up a whole conversation to, like, you know, to understand that. One of the I mean, I tell him an example in the book about talking to this guy at an FCA event that years later I was actually speaking at. And I tell this story of this guy who didn't realize it was me, the speaker that he was talking to. And then we ended up having dinner, and I talked to him about like Jesus being the Lamb of God versus the Son of God. Do you remember that story? Should I tell that one? Because I've got another one too. But so anyways, in that sense, I had to explain to him, because he got caught up on the whole Son of God, because people don't totally understand Son of God. They think son and daughters differently than we do.
Yeah.
You know, like, you know, he's thinking God having intercourse, you know, like that's what he gets hung up on. So I'm like, okay, forget that. Then let's talk about the Lamb of God. And I talked to him about sacrificing animals, and told him, you know, what would it take to cover the sacrifice, to cover the sins of all of humanity, not just one family. And he was like, man, it would take so many animals, or God's, you know, like, and I said, you know, it would take a God-sized sacrifice, right? A big sacrifice. And he was like, yeah, it would take a lot. And I said, well, maybe it would take God himself. And that's what he did. He sacrificed himself to redeem humanity. And that's when he got it. He was like, that makes sense, you know? Recently, a Muslim guy I talked to after a service where I really felt like, you know, people were trying to get him to make a decision, or to see what Jesus was doing and all that. And I just kind of spoke, like, in a sense, give him a picture of maybe even a little bit prophetically. I just said, hey, have you noticed that Jesus has always been in your life? Everybody's been talking to you about Jesus for so long in your life. And he was like, yeah, he keeps coming up randomly, you know, in different stages of my life. And I said, you know, so like, maybe think of it that Jesus is like a room, or like a door that throughout your life, you always walk by it. For some reason, in different stages, you always walk by this door in your life. It's a room in the life of your house. You know what I'm saying? If your life was a house, it's always like this door into a room, and you always walk by it and you're like, I don't want to go in. And I said, your whole life, people have told you to go in that room. And your whole life, you've asked what's in the room. And you've become really close, but you've never walked in. And you really want to know what's in the room, and you want to experience what's in the room. And people have told you that they've stepped in the room in their own house, and they've stepped in that room, and it was profound for them. And he was like, yeah, but what's that room in my house, in my life? And I said, the only way they're going to find that out is to walk in it. So you just need to walk in it. And he goes, what does that mean? He says, so I said, that means inviting Jesus in your life, being the door that you walk through. Obviously he says he's the door, I said, just walk in, man. You're not going to experience what you want to unless you walk in that door. So yeah, I told him that, I prayed with him. And then I would say like a week or 10 days later, he just texted me. He's like, hey, I just walked in. That was his text. I just walked in. And he's like, oh my God, I cannot believe it. And then a couple of days later, he texted me that he was getting baptized, and he was from out of town. And so yeah. So I mean, God's still working.
Yes. I have a lot of pastors and ministers that watch the podcast. And so as you moved out to North Carolina and you planted this church, I know a lot of people church planting is a big thing going on right now. People are trying to reach into different areas and plant a church. What are some of the biggest challenge you face doing that?
Yeah, I think it's, I mean, everybody's challenges are different. Mine are different because I'm Pakistani, ex-Muslim, starting a church in the South. It's tough, and I joke about it and all that. But as I talk to other pastors and leaders, the challenge really is that there's been so much, I would say, so much more added to what it means to be a follower of Jesus. What does church look like? What it's supposed to look like, Like, so at Mosaic, we have this mission that we are reclaiming the message and movement of Jesus. And the reason why I'm passionate about that, and we're trying to do that in our part of, the kingdom, is that, there's so much ideas of what, a Christian is supposed to be and look like. And depending on what part of the US you live in, and what part of the denominations you're part of, being a Christian looks very different.
That's so true now. I mean, to even ask someone a Christian, you almost, 20 years ago, you could be pretty clear about that. But, now someone, you ask them that question, well, you could get so many different answers. I mean, wow.
Yeah. So many different answers. And so, I mean, I think the challenge is to not get discouraged. So pastors listening should not get discouraged, but to really call people to a very simple, very pure life in following the Spirit of God and the teachings of Jesus. To make it just, like, let's not bring anything of the world in it, in a sense, like, don't bring politics or culture or issues or other things into it. Like, what does it really truly mean to love your neighbor? Just because that's the only, like as we try to disciple people, what are we trying to do? Because sometimes if we're not careful, we disciple people into becoming a Baptist. Like, we disciple people into becoming a Methodist.
Yeah.
Jesus said to the Pharisees, woe you Pharisees, you travel over land and sea, and to convert one to become like you, and you make them twice as a child of hell as you are. Like, I mean, he was so,
that's pretty stout.
right. So he was like, you guys, I admire that you're religious and your Pharisees were people who were devoted. I mean, that's what a Pharisee means. So, but they're devoted to what? That was the big question, you know? So, you know, whose kingdom are we building here? What, whose citizens are we? You know? So I'd encourage pastors to just, you know, because we will get discouraged if we're trying to pastor or disciple people to become a certain kind of Christian, instead of learning, being hungry for Jesus, being open to the Spirit, to be willing to be molded by God. I mean, that's really what discipleship looks like. That's what pastoring looks like. To teach people to hear, to feed themselves, to go after God, to spend time in prayer and learning for themselves, you know, to create hunger for people to love and lead like Jesus. I mean, that's pretty much it. So, yeah. Anyways.
Well, that's awesome. I want to be respectful of your time. So how can people follow you or get in contact with you? Do you have a website, social media pages, church stuff?
Thank
I'll
you.
put the book. Everybody want to pick up a copy. I'll put this in the show notes so people can click on the link and buy that.
Awesome. Yeah. So number one, thank you for this opportunity. I do have a website. It's just my name, naeemfazal.org. If you just Google my name, as you know, I pop up different stories, different things, different sermons. Mosaic Church is our church. Online, contacting me would be just my first name, Naeem, at mosaicchurch.tv. And then again, I'm on all social media platforms, you know, Facebook and Instagram, and YouTube. So you can find more resources there. The book recently came out on Audible, so that you can download the book on Audible as well now, and obviously on Kindle. And yeah, so, and I'm working on my second book, so let's see what happens.
All right, what's that going to be about?
It's going to be about overcoming fear. Yeah, and creating and creating future. So yeah.
When can we look for that?
Oh man, I just right now publishers are kind of looking it over. The title of the book right now, the working title of the book is called Tomorrow Needs You. So so we'll see. But then after that, it won't come out to about a year and a half. But
Well, thanks so much for your time, for your
of course,
ministry.
thank you for your ministry. Thank you for doing this.